Please welcome John Oates, one half of the best-selling duo in the history of rock and roll. He is an inductee in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the American Songwriters Hall of Fame, a recipient of the prestigious BMI Icon Award, as well as numerous American Music Awards, MTV Awards, and multiple Grammy nominations, and a long history of philanthropy. Since forming a creative partnership with Daryl Hall in the early 1970s, Daryl Hall and John Oates have recorded 21 albums, selling more than 80 million copies. They have scored 10 #1 records, 20 top 40 hits, and John himself has released 7 critically acclaimed solo albums. It is my pleasure to introduce John Oates.
Hey there, this is John Oates, and it is time to face the music with Joby Rogers. All right. Hey, I like your background, man. I don't know what you got going, but it's cool.
Thank you for joining me, man. I really appreciate it.
Sure, of course.
So let me start by saying I've been an admirer of your music since the 70s.
Yeah, well, thanks. Thank you.
I'd like to start by thanking you and your wife, Amy, for your compassion and dedication, and not only associating with the fight against hunger, but engaging in it as well.
Thank you. Well, we wanted to try our best to do something. It was part of, I think it was part of the reaction to this year of COVID, where we felt a little bit helpless, that we couldn't really do more, and we were trying to figure out what we could do. Really, in a way, too, it was therapeutic for us to start a project like this, to kind of break through the depression of feeling, kind of ineffectual in a way. And when we thought we could perhaps try this, and it began to take on a really positive energy, and there was a lot of very positive response, it really made us feel like, okay, here's something we can really do and actually hopefully see some actual results from it. So here again, it was a little bit self-serving in that, it helped us through this weird period of time, but in the end, hopefully we're going to help a lot of other people, and that's the bottom line.
You and your wife of 25 years now?
Yes.
Congratulations. You have since partnered with feedingamerica.org and Drive Entertainment Group to create and produce Oates Songfest 7908. And for those of you not familiar with 7908, it is the altitude of Aspen, Colorado. And you and your wife wanted to honor the 10th anniversary of a live performance at the historic Wheeler Opera House there.
Yes, sir.
Why was that particular performance the inspiration for what would become Oates Songfest 7908?
Well, I'll give you a little backstory on that. Back in 2010, we had just moved. We had been living in Aspen, Colorado for 25 years. And we had just got a place in Nashville, and I was really becoming comfortable in the Americana community and doing a lot of songwriters in the round shows at the Bluebird Cafe. And I just thought it would be great for Aspen. Had never had any type of show like that. And I thought, and I was making a lot of good friends in Nashville, and I said, it would be cool to try to do something similar in Aspen. So we put a show together at the Wheeler Opera House, and we called it the Aspen Songwriters Festival. And 7908 was my wife's idea. She saw the sign as we couldn't come up with a name for it. And as we drove into town, there was a sign that said Aspen, Colorado, 7908 feet, and she said, there's your name, name for your show. So we wanted to honor that. This past summer, we were out there again, and we were talking to some of the people at the theater at the Wheeler Opera House about the possibility of doing another live show and reviving that. And it was very positive, but when it became apparent due to COVID that wasn't going to happen, that a live show wasn't going to happen, we said, well, maybe we can do a virtual version. And that's when it became more of that's when the idea of a charitable component happened. That's when we reached out to Feeding America, and it transitioned from an idea of reviving it back in Colorado to making it more global. And that's what happened.
All right, so this is going to live stream March 20th.
Correct. And it'll be on Nugs.tv is our streaming partner.
Okay. So your colleague Daryl Hall will be there, Dave Grohl, I heard, Sammy Hagar, Darius Rucker, Sheila E., among many others. And the show will be streamed free of charge, but with a donation component to it.
That's right. We will have a QR code and we will have a URL that you can tap on that will take you right to the site. Yeah, we wanted to make this as transparent and as easy as possible. It was very important to us that there was no upcharge to be able to watch this show. We wanted everyone to be able to watch it, and we were just hoping for the best, that people would be would have the wherewithal and feel compassionate enough to donate. So we're really we're trusting this to the musical gods, to hope that a show of this sort will really bring people out. And I want to tell you, and we're in the process of putting it together right now. The video performances are unbelievable. And I have to say, I'm not trying to hype things. I'm just telling you that I wasn't sure what we would get from, I thought maybe some of the artists would go, yeah, sure, we'll send you a quick iPhone video, from the couch. But some of the performances are off the hook. I'm telling you, and I've never seen them. So they're all unique. They're all one of a kind. And I'm not going to single out anyone in particular, but Dave Grohl's performance, he tells the actual story of how he wrote Everlong. And it's like 6 minutes long. I don't think he's ever done anything like that before. So this is really, we're going into uncharted territory. So and Daryl's performance, he's just sitting at his piano and he's singing a song called I'm in a Philly Mood, which is one of his great solo songs. And, I remember back in the day when he and I first met, and he would sit at the piano and perform songs just like that. And it brought me back to the early 70s when I would sit there and I would listen to and see what he could do on his own. And so there's some really unique moments that are just, like I said, people have never seen it before. And also, I don't know if you know about Sasquatch, who is my co-host. Okay, well, you need to check him out. I have a co-host named Sasquatch, who is a Sasquatch playing saxophone player.
Okay.
And he is going to be co-hosting with me, and we've got a lot of really entertaining, cool intros and stuff that we do. So we're trying to make it entertaining and cool, but I guarantee you the performances are really going to be impressive.
In November of 2020, I watched a segment on CBS Evening News that was sponsored by feedingamerica.org. It mentioned that as a direct result of the pandemic and the ensuing lockdown, that 40% of Americans sought food assistance for the first time ever, and a staggering 20% of Americans were living below the hunger line. To me, that was extremely alarming. And during the lockdown in the spring of 2020, we literally witnessed how fast the world began to heal itself when we all just took a beat, specifically in regards to the climate, air quality, and a huge drop in gun-related crime. In witnessing how quickly things can change for the better when we are mandated to do so, in your opinion, John, what would it take to eradicate hunger? Not necessarily in the world, but just here in the States.
Well, I do not profess to be an expert in this world, but I have learned, as you have, I can tell. I've learned a lot about it, and as you said, the stats are staggering in their negative, in how awful and how all pervasive this food insecurity situation is. The thing that struck my wife and I was that we could walk into a grocery store here in Nashville or wherever, and the shelves are full. They're full of food. I do not understand why some of that food cannot get to, and I know there's a lot of wastefulness. There's food that is not used. There's, various things like that. And I know there's organizations that are trying to remedy that. But the overall thing that struck me was that in a country like ours, no one should be not able to have food. I just didn't understand it. And so we reached out to Feeding America. And when we started seeing the numbers, as you mentioned, it's heartbreaking. And it should just not be happening in our country.
Hunger has been a part of every culture for millennia.
Yeah.
The United States is the global leader in food waste. Americans disregard nearly 80 billion pounds of food every year. That's 30 to 40% of our food is simply thrown away. That stat alone, there's no, like you were saying, there's no excuse for hunger. I mean, what, in your opinion, what can the average person like myself really do to really make an impact and to help eliminate that?
Well, I think there's a lot of levels to it. I've always been a proponent of act locally, think globally and act locally. I think everyone can affect their immediate surroundings by being by being less wasteful personally, by by supporting their local food banks, by if you have extra or you can afford to have extra, donate. There are people out there, and if you have the wherewithal and the will to actually physically get out there and volunteer, there's a number of ways that people can affect their local communities. And if we all affect our local communities, the overall effect will translate to something that's more global or national. One of the reasons we chose Feeding America was we did research and we found them to be an incredibly transparent organization, with over 98% of the money that is generated to Feeding America going to actual food banks and actual getting into people's hands. And when big organizations are very notorious for eating up a lot of their funds in administrative costs. When we saw that only 2% went to administrative costs, we were very impressed. And once we got to know the folks at Feeding America, we were even more impressed. So we're really happy that we partnered with them and that we could be able to somehow help in that level. So I think that's what really everyone has to do. Sure, watch our show, donate on a national level, but also get out there, get in the real world and see if you can do something that will affect your local community.
Hall & Oates are not unfamiliar with charity events. In '85, you were involved in Live Aid and the following single, We Are the World. Have you always been inclined to reach out and use your art to help in times of need? Is this a part of your DNA?
I think it's been a part of our my personal DNA for sure. Daryl and I have been involved with obviously the We Are the World and USA for Africa, they're the big ones that everyone always focuses on. But over the years, we've been involved with Toys for Tots. We were involved with various charities in New York City. We don't make a big deal out of it, and we don't advertise that fact because there's no need to. But yes, I think we've been socially conscious as much as we can. But this one here, I think it's important that we make a big, we want to make a big splash with this because it's the only way to get people's attention in this crazy, world of instant gratification. So we need to really get the word out, and folks like you will, of course, help us do that.
Absolutely. Any personal memories of We Are the World and specifically Michael Jackson?
Yeah, well, I've got a lot of personal memories. I'm going to tilt the camera up here.
Okay.
If you look back there above that little multicolored board.
Yep.
Okay. That's a picture of us during that period of time. And right there, you see the other framed thing?
Yep.
Right there.
Yep. Okay.
That is the actual lead sheet from We Are the World that we were given when we entered the room, and I got everyone to sign it. Wow. So on that sheet is all the signatures of the people that and I made sure I got everyone to sign it. And that's very unusual for me because usually I miss these opportunities when I have. From what I understand, only Kenny Rogers and myself went around and got everyone to sign it.
Oh, wow.
But one of the great memories for me was to be standing where they placed me on the bleachers with all the singers. Ray Charles was immediately off my left shoulder, right in front of me, and right behind my right shoulder was Bob Dylan. And so I was between those two, and I was thinking to myself, this will never, ever, ever happen again. And try to make myself very aware of how amazing this exact moment was. And sure, there were a lot of other moments involved, but they're all pretty much well documented. But it was great to be in a room where there were no managers, no handlers, and everyone, all the musicians. Their walls, their kind of PR walls were shattered, and everyone just was real, and that was the best part of it.
Anything about MJ?
Well, he was quiet as he usually, was. He used to come and see us when we played in LA, and he would come backstage and speak very quietly and in that whispery way he did, tell us that, he loved to dance to "I Can't Go For That" in his bedroom. But he let Quincy Jones and Lionel do most of the talking, and he was there. Just kind of his presence was felt for sure.
So let's talk about some of your solo work. Did you find music or did music find you? And what I mean was it a mutual attraction or did you just happen upon it? Did you always have this creative urge?
I sang as a little kid, as a baby, literally. As soon as I could talk, I started singing nursery rhymes. And I don't know why, I don't know how, it just happened. I have a recording of me singing "Here Comes Peter Cottontail" that we recorded in Coney Island Amusement Park in Brooklyn, in one of those little booths where you put a coin in and it would spit out a little vinyl record. I have that from well, everyone knows how old I am, so I'm not worried about telling you, 1954. So shortly thereafter, about a year or so after that, I went back to that same vocal booth and recorded an Elvis song, "All Shook Up." So I just sang. I started taking guitar lessons at 6 and took vocal lessons at 5. And I was just a musically oriented kid. And my mother was a bit of a stage mother. She pushed me toward it, but she didn't have to push too hard. And I never needed to be told to practice. I love playing the guitar and I love singing, and I never looked back. So I never really I'm one of the fortunate ones. I never really had any other job in my life. I did have a summer job at a at a greenhouse in Pennsylvania when I was in high school, and I fell through the glass roof, and the guy fired me after the first day on the job. So so I guess that was a good thing. I taught guitar lessons, taught my way through, played in a band all through junior high and high school, taught guitar lessons for a bit during my college years, and then met Daryl and we began to work together. So, I'm really one of the lucky ones.
You have a distinct voice, and I realize that it's an instrument. And the human skull's acoustics make us hear our own voice differently than what we hear in playback. So, in your heart and mind, what is your relationship with your voice and how does it fit into your identity? Is it a love-hate relationship?
It's intrinsically connected to me as a human being. I don't know the difference between the fact that I can sing and the fact that I talk. It's the same thing. To be honest with you, my Nashville experience, where I have taken on the role of a lead singer much more than I did in my role with Daryl, because of course Daryl's one of the great singers of all time. I've gotten much better as a singer. I've been able to stretch my limitations, and I've also dug deeply into the subtleties of me as a lead singer. Finding the correct keys, making sure that the range of the songs that I was writing, I began to conform my songwriting. I had, when I wasn't singing lead, I had no constraints on my songwriting. I could do anything I want in terms of keys, range, things like that, because either Daryl was singing it or someone else might be singing it. But when it fell upon me to be the person who's going to be delivering the song, I was much more conscious of range, keys, style, phrasing, things like that. So I've become a much better singer over the years, just because now I'm singing all the time.
Your solo efforts, specifically Mississippi Mile and the Bluesville Sessions, and your latest Arkansas, are rooted in blues music. And recently, I had a very candid conversation with Chris Thomas King. I'm not sure if you know who that is. Did you see "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou"?
Yeah.
He was the guitar player in the band.
Oh, okay.
The blues singer there. He played the Robert Johnson part.
All right.
And he's kind of become a diplomat in trying to get out the true history of the blues, and not what has been presented to the blues music fans, who predominantly connect the blues singer to folklore of being a descendant of slaves or uneducated Black man. In your view, how much of your music and rock and roll in general do you think is indebted to the blues?
Well, I would say, me personally, and rock and roll and rhythm and blues, whatever you want to call it, the roots of American music is, it really comes from the Deep South. And it's here again, it's totally and inseparable from the African American experience. I will give all credit to everything that I really like and that moves me to the African American music experience that was generated in the Deep South. There's absolutely no doubt about it. They're the records that I liked when I was a kid, even though I heard Elvis Presley and things like that. I learned shortly thereafter that, the music he was making was a direct result of the music he was hearing in the juke joints and the places in Memphis and Tupelo and the places he grew up in. So
isn't Hound Dog a copy of Big Mama Thornton, isn't she?
Well, yeah, Hound Dog. Well, believe it or not, and I know this is crazy. Hound Dog was written by Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller, two Jewish guys from New York. But they were smart enough to have Big Mama Thornton sing it, and Elvis picked up on it after that. If you've ever heard the original, it's pretty deep. Yeah. But those guys were blues fans. They were fans of, here again, of the music of the Deep South, because they wrote it in the Brill Building has very little to do with the fact. Right. But it's just it's really the music of America's South and the African American experience is one of the greatest gifts that America has ever given to the world. Mm-hmm. It's a flagship invitation to what is aspirational about American, and what is also very, very sad about the American experience. So I wanted to honor that with the Arkansas album. I began to realize that that a lot of people thought that pop music started with rock and roll. American popular music, here again, is connected to the invention of the radio and the invention of the phonograph. Those two technologies, they were really the catalyst for American popular music, because prior to that, the only way you could hear music was if you heard someone play it live, or you took some sheet music home and you played it on the piano in your parlor or whatever, or or someone played an instrument like a guitar or whatever. As soon as radio and the phonograph machine made it available for people to have music in their homes, that was the birth of American popular music. So the Arkansas album is really a snapshot into the early days of where American popular music really started, prior to the big band and prior to rock and roll.
Putting out a solo LP, as you just touched on a minute ago, detached from Hall & Oates, you had to go through some level of transition, and you basically had to find your voice alone in front of an audience. How did you prepare and navigate that reality?
It evolved. I started in 2001 with an album called Feng Shui, which was really not much in terms of, it was a collection of old stuff that I had, demos that I redid, a few new songs. It had no point of view. It was just an opportunity for me to go in the studio and make a record on my own. But the record that followed was called 1,000 Miles of Life. That was the first album in 2007 that I recorded in Nashville. And that was the one where I began to become part of the Americana music community and make friends in that world. And I got to play with people like Jerry Douglas and Bela Fleck and Sam Bush and people like that. And the Five Blind Boys from Alabama sang on the record. That was really, and the thing is that people thought, well, why is Oates doing this? Where's this coming from? But what they don't realize is that's who I was before I met Daryl Hall. Right. That's the music I was making. I was a folk blues player and singer. And during the Hall & Oates, experience, we both became something else. We both evolved from Daryl's roots and my roots. We melded those together into something that was totally unique and different. But I never lost the purity of those days. And my Nashville experience gave me the ability to tap back into it. And as I did, here again with Mississippi Mile, the Bluesville Sessions, and so on and so forth, and into Arkansas, I got deeper and deeper and more, and I really refined that kind of, it was kind of a way to step back to go forward.
Your influences and inspirations for becoming a musician are pretty well documented, but who was the inspiration or the influence for you to become a songwriter? If you're the Picasso, who was your Matisse?
Well, I, I think, I can't remember what grade it was, but I believe it was ninth grade. Um, it was around 64 when the folk revival was happening, and the Dylan was doing his first Dylan and people like Phil Oakes and Pete Seeger were doing protest songs. I had written a poem as a part of a class assignment in English class, and it was during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I wrote a poem about the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I remember the only line I remember was "a pillow of death 90 miles from our shore, lurking in darkness, awaiting the war." That was my big line. And anyway, at any rate, I got an A on the poem.
Okay.
And the teacher knew that I played the guitar because I was already in bands by that time, and said to me, "You should put this to music." And I had actually never thought of that.
Wow.
I never, because at the time I was playing in bands, playing the songs that were on the radio, or playing, R&B or whatever, Chuck Berry and Little Richard and stuff like that. So I thought, wow, hey, yeah, just like Bob Dylan, and I actually put it to music, although I don't remember what happened with it. I never recorded it. So it's lost to, the time, whatever. But that was my first, realization that, hey, wow, I could write a song. And so I did. And then from then on, I began to write. And I wrote a song in 1967 called "I Need Your Love." And we recorded it with a group called the Masters, my high school band. And it came out on Philadelphia radio in 1967. And so that was the beginning of it.
How do you approach songwriting? Is it methodical? Is it a wait for inspiration?
It is like a muscle. It's like exercising a muscle. Like when I don't feel like physically exercising, I really don't want to start. And when I'm not writing songs, it's very hard for me to start. But once I start, I can't stop. It really is like that. This COVID thing, when COVID finally, hit in the beginning in March, and I realized that we were no longer going to go on tour, and the actual reality of that set in, I began to write like a crazy person. And I wrote more songs between March and June than I had probably written in the last 5 years. And it was it was a chance to self-reflect. And I reconfigured my home studio, made it a little bit better. And, that gave me something to look forward to. And I began to make demos at home.
Right.
And those demos started turning out really good, and I got into it, and it was really a great way of passing time. So this period of time has really given me the opportunity to dig deep, and I wrote a brand new song for the Songfest that we're doing, and it'll be the last song on the show, and I'm really proud of it. It's a song about brotherhood and about the need to reach out for a helping hand, and I'm really, really proud of it. It's called Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee. If you know anything about Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee, they were a duo that played together for about 40 years, but they actually hated each other. And they never actually spoke to each other, but they needed each other. And in a way, it might be a metaphor for me and Daryl, even though Daryl and I do not hate each other. We're actually still good friends. It's hard to believe. But in a sense, I used it as a metaphor for reaching out for a helping hand and needing brotherhood. So I'm really proud of it. So it'll be the last song on the show. I thought it was a fitting way to end the show.
Every musician I've ever talked to had at least one or two songs that can only be described as a divine intervention that seemed to come out of nowhere, complete. Any for you?
Yeah, a number of them. Well, this song I just mentioned, Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee, the idea came to me by a guy named Joe Henry, and not the country singer Joe Henry, a poet and an author from Colorado who has written for John Denver and Frank Sinatra and a number of people. He and I got together over the summer when I was out in Colorado, and he's the one that told me about the Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee anecdote about them not liking each other but yet needing each other. And we wrote a few lyrics, but we never finished the song. And so that sat for about 6 months. And then all of a sudden I found it in my lyric ideas. And all of a sudden I wrote the song. It just flew out of me. That was one for sure. She's Gone was another one that came from really, Daryl and I wrote that song in about an hour and a half. And I had the idea for a chorus, but it was very folky and very almost like a Cat Stevens kind of thing. And Daryl sat down at the piano and played you know, the riff that you hear in the beginning, you know, ka-dunk, gong, ga, ga-da-da, ka-dunk, gong, ga, ga-da-da, that very signature piano riff. And as soon as he played that, we began to write, and we wrote the entire song. So, and there's been a few like that, and there's some that are like pulling teeth and take forever, you know.
Do you have a favorite album or song, either yours or a collaboration with Daryl, that you feel has been underrated, or that weren't singles or hits that you would like to see get their moment in the sun?
Sure, all the ones that I sang lead on the Hall & Oates records. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding, but I'm not kidding. I don't know, you know, songs like Camellia, Alone Too Long. Those songs are kind of cool. Alone Too Long got picked up by the HBO show a few years ago, and became the theme song for that. Now, you know, I don't really think like that. It's just the songs kind of find their way. You know, they're out there in the world. I think what's really cool in the modern, you know, internet virtual streaming world is that a whole new generation of fans can find whatever they want. Right. And they gravitate towards songs that weren't necessarily the big hits. Right. And they find them and they share them. And I think that's really, it's great for artists like Daryl and I, who have a huge catalog, who have these songs. We've always felt that a lot of our album cuts were just as good as our big hits, but you know, they got overshadowed by the big hits.
Tell me about your personal and passionate connection I know you have to the Philadelphia sound, and the influence that groups such as Parliament Funkadelic, Harold Melvin, Teddy Pendergrass, Stylistics, what was their impact on you?
Well, you know, Daryl and I, we both made our first singles in 1967 separately. He had a group called the Temptones, I had a group called the Masters. Daryl's group, the Temptones, were discovered by a guy named Jimmy Bishop, who was one of the top DJs at WDAS, one of the top R&B stations. And Leon Huff from Gamble and Huff played on that record. And so Daryl was really almost became part of the Gamble and Huff thing when Gamble and Huff were just starting out. And my group, we needed help with an arrangement on our song. And we reached out to a guy named Bobby Martin, who was really a young arranger, who later became a Grammy-winning arranger for Gamble and Huff. He arranged Backstabbers and things like that. So he arranged our song for us. So, you know, we were kind of growing up with Gamble and Huff. And we worked for a guy in Philadelphia named John Madera, who was on the 4th floor of the Schubert Theater building. Gamble and Huff were on the 7th floor. And so we were all, it was such a small music community. So we were all working together. And, you know, there came a time when it was like, Daryl and I almost, you know, should we partner up with Gamble and Huff and be part of their staff songwriting team? And Tommy Bell was a good friend of ours. So it was really, we were growing up together. And, you know, it wasn't until Daryl and I went on our own and moved to New York in 1971 that Gamble and Huff really hit their stride. Mm-hmm. So, but, you know, the Philadelphia sound, the sound of Philadelphia that has become so synonymous with Gamble and Huff really was just in its infancy during that period of time when we were there. But the sound of the city is what really was more important to us. The sound of you know, here again, I go back to the, you know, it's kind of the, you know, the Great Migration. You know, if you look at that historically, I mean, I don't know how deep you want to get into this, but I can go very deep in this stuff. Historically, you know, if you look at the Mason-Dixon line, the dividing line between the North and the South, after you cross the Mason-Dixon line, what's the first city you come to? Philadelphia. So, you know, as a lot of African Americans were migrating north for a better way of life, one of the first places they landed was Philadelphia, and they brought their music, their culture, their sensibilities to the urban city that was Philadelphia, that was so Anglo and so rooted in the English and Anglo experience. Classical music, you know, a lot of great educational, you know, places. And so it's this unique combination of the Anglo-American roots and the African-American roots that combine in Philadelphia that make it soulful and deeply deeply rhythmic, but yet with a sophistication that a lot of other cities didn't have. So yes, to answer your question, yes, the Philadelphia sound is inherently, it has to do with the chord changes. It has to do with how we impose melodies over those chord changes. Chord changes are usually more sophisticated than what you had coming out of, say, Muscle Shoals or Memphis or anything like that, which is much more rooted in the really blues tradition. Now you get to Philadelphia and you have a classical music, input. Listen to the songs that Tommy Bell wrote for the Stylistics and Delphonics, and the Spinners. They're really, very harmonically sophisticated. So that's where that's what we come from.
I remember Daryl touching on this a while back around your time of your induction into the Hall of Fame. So I interviewed fellow Philadelphian Chubby Checker a while back, and he was upset that with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's shunning of some of those artists you just talked about, and including him himself. He was particularly upset that some of those musicians like Bill Withers, who were inducted well after their prime and their touring days, therefore they were not able to capitalize off of a Rock Hall induction. And what I mean by, they weren't able to go out on the road and tour and take advantage of the newfound recognition.
Sure.
So any thoughts on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and shunning some of these particular groups?
I don't like to get into it. It's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is it was fantastic for us. It gave us, we were eligible for over 15 years before we even got nominated. So it wasn't like exactly we were waiting that not losing sleep over it, but it sure was great to be honored. And I felt more like it was like a lifetime achievement award more than anything else. But I do agree that, having that notoriety and having that kind of publicity that comes from being in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame would be much more valued if you were still around to enjoy it. Right. And so it's a shame. And I don't think a lot of great Philadelphia artists have been really represented very well. And Philadelphia, the Philadelphia music tradition goes, just like my Arkansas album, goes way, happened way earlier than Gamble and Huff. You had the Cameo Parkway thing, and whether sure, Cameo Parkway is a lot of bubblegum, Frankie Avalon, Fabian, Chubby Checker, the Dovells, that kind of thing. But beyond that, you had Billie Holiday and, unbelievable jazz musicians, Wes Montgomery, people like that who came out of Philadelphia, who really, preceded the Philadelphia sound, so to speak. But still, Philadelphia has a very rich musical history that has not really been honored, I don't think, as well as it should have been.
Your 2017 memoir, Change of Seasons, took a detailed look into your life. For you, what were the challenges as far as research, literally, psychologically, logistically, in bringing that much of your life to life?
Well, the biggest challenge, before I even got into the book, was how was I going to tell my own personal story when my own personal story is so intimately connected to the Hall & Oates experience? Because after all, my entire adult life has been the Hall & Oates experience from the time I've been a teenager, basically.
Was it difficult to relive some of those moments?
No, not really. But I didn't want to relive them I didn't want to speak, I didn't want to try to make my memoir be the definitive version of the Hall & Oates experience, because without Daryl, how could that be? It wouldn't be accurate, and it wouldn't be fair. So I didn't want to even attempt that. What I wanted to do was take the things that I thought were personally impactful for me and, interweave them into a narrative that was that touched on it, but wasn't really trying to represent it, fully. Because I had other things I wanted to talk about. I have a very rich life. I've done, I've been a race car driver, an airplane pilot. I should have been dead about 7 times, which is a whole other book, by the way. I just wanted to, I wanted to give an overview of who I was as a person that was more than just who I was as part of the Hall & Oates experience.
Were there any reactions from your friends or family who may have discovered things about you they didn't know prior to the book's release?
Yeah, a little bit. My dad was a little surprised at certain things. My mom had passed away. Unfortunately, she couldn't enjoy it, and unfortunately, she had Alzheimer's. She wouldn't have been able to read it anyway. And it's a shame too, because she was a very important part of my musical upbringing. Because, as I said, she was a bit of a stage mother, and she really lived vicariously through me as a singer and a musician. Um, no, but the cool thing was I wrote most of the book while I was on tour with Daryl, because when you're on tour, you got a lot of time on your hands. So I said, let's make most of the time, hotels, airplanes, buses, whatever. So as I would write, especially when it had anything to do with Daryl, or it was something that was, that where he was, either mentioned or involved, I would let him read it. And I would let him read it incrementally as we went along, because the last thing I wanted to do was write 400 pages of book and then have him turn around and go, hey man, I didn't want you to say that, or I wish you wouldn't have said that, or you should have said that this way. So what I did was, I actually will take a lot of credit for being very smart about this. I let him read it incrementally. And so I got his approvals all along the way. So I never had to change anything, which was really great.
So I was going to ask you that. Did you give anybody in your life veto power over the final draft?
No, absolutely not.
Awesome.
Except Daryl, because he's the only one that mattered. And he has an amazing memory. So there were times when I would let him read something. He would go, hey man, you forgot about this and that. And I would say, oh yeah, cool. And I would add it in. Or he would say, you should really, didn't you remember that this is how this happened? And I was like, okay, cool. And so I would incorporate some of his input into it. But the main thing was I didn't really want to do anything that he wasn't comfortable with.
I saw bits of it online. I read as much as I could. And it seems to be a very inspirational narrative of a life that's constantly being reinvented and reimagined. And you talked about your difficult financial situations, your experiences as you struggled for many years playing, dive bars in small places, and detailed revelations on dealing with the treachery and betrayal of show business, especially the music business. Did you find that frustrating early on, that it wasn't just about the music?
Well, no, because I was oblivious to it, and that's why I made the mistakes I made, and that's why I got in the situations that I got in, because I didn't pay enough attention to the details of the business side, and I was too willing to fall into the trap of running around the world as a pop star and enjoying all that came with that, as opposed to being much more aware of the ramifications of certain things that were happening that might affect my future. So it was a life lesson. But to be honest with you, I don't know how much you've read about in that part of the book, but I wanted to talk about that, but I didn't want to be vindictive and have a lot of recriminations, because the reason is had that not happened, I wouldn't be the person I am today. Exactly. And I'm very happy today. And a lot of amazing things have happened to me because of the mistakes I made. So the fact that I learned from them and I was able to transition from them into a better life, there was no reason for me to go back and be mean-spirited. I've read too many memoirs where guys or people talk about how they hate someone, or they want to set the record straight because this person did this to me, and it wasn't worth doing, because of the place I'm in now is directly related to what happened.
You also reflected on some pretty wild times in your heyday.
Oh no, I didn't.
How have you
trust me, I didn't.
Well, reflection.
Okay.
How have you overcome the trappings of fame that have caused the demise of so many other artists?
I grew up in a solid middle-class family with the 1950s, American ethics of work hard, don't overreach, don't, and just, my parents were good people, and they came from Italian American, ethnic background. And my dad worked 2 jobs. My mom worked 2 jobs. We never wanted for anything, but we never had too much either. And it's something I've carried with me. And, my wife, it comes from a farming family in Illinois. Her parents still farm the property, and she grew up the kind of in a different way, but the same with the same type of ethics. And we have just tried to instill that in our son. And and I never got into drugs. I tried things, I experimented, but it wasn't really a reality for me. So I've had a lot of self-discipline, and I've been able to carry that forward into today.
Without getting political, I want to talk about the role of music and artists in general in today's climate. What do you think personally the role of music and artists specifically needs to be in today's highly charged, divisive atmosphere?
I don't think it needs to be anything. I don't understand. I don't understand the idea that someone would think differently because a musician has an opinion about something. It doesn't make any sense to me. So that's where that's all I got to say about it.
Is it an artist's duty to reflect the times? Do you think it's better to use your voice and risk losing fans, or just not?
Everyone can make their own decision about things like that. Okay. As a musician, if you have something to say and you want to say it, and you believe that what your thoughts are important enough for other people to care or listen to, do whatever you want to do. I just my philosophy is understand the facts as best you can.
Right.
Educate yourself as best you can, and make your own decisions based on what you think is right for you.
To what extent do you feel music has the potential of being an actual way to change people's ideologies?
I don't know about that. I don't know whether it has the ability to change ideologies. I know it has the ability to change emotions. It has the ability to elicit responses that are much more important than ideologies. They're responses of the heart and soul. They're responses of compassion, inspiration, and those things are at the root of what it means to be a human being, and they transcend ideologies.
Right.
Because if we have compassion and we think with our hearts and soul, then we will be able to live the life that we want to live, or help other people live that life. And that's really more important than and maybe it will change ideologies.
That's very good. Doing the MJ thing, I've afforded the opportunity to travel quite a bit. And what I've learned from travel, I mean, I've been to about 15 countries. I've been to just about every state here in the US, is travel is fatal to prejudice, to bigotry, narrow-mindedness. I mean, you basically learn that all people cry, laugh, work, worry, and die. Was traveling a similar experience for you?
Oh, absolutely. Traveling the world has given me the opportunity to have a small, not a much better insight into different cultures, how people live their lives, what's important to them. And of all the countries in the world, I mean, other than third world countries where people just don't have the ability to travel because of their economic circumstance or whatever, or their geographical circumstance, Americans can be very parochial. They can be very not. And it has to do with the geography of North America too. Being separated by two great oceans, you don't have the same connection to the rest of the world that Europe does, or some of the other countries do, because they're much more in a closer proximity, right, and to other cultures. So Americans can tend to be very jingoistic in a way, and be very kind of isolated socially and culturally, which is not good, because you need to know that there's another world out there.
I mean, it's like that show Undercover Boss. Every boss should be made to do
Right.
2 weeks on the line.
Right.
Why do you think your fans have connected with your music on such a large scale and for so many years?
I don't know. I don't know. They like the songs. So the songs live on. You know, the songs they have some sort of emotional way of resonating with people.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. I don't know why. It just is. There's craftsmanship, there's professionalism, there's the making of well made, well executed records. That give these songs a platform to live on through time. But in the end, it's the compositions. It's the songs. I don't know why. You're asking me a lot of heavy duty questions.
How do you carry the heritage and legacy of the group forward through all these years and still keep it fresh and relevant for yourself as well as new fans that you've connected with along the way?
Well, we don't do it that often. We don't tour. We tour a lot, but we tour in kind of very livable chunks where we take time off so that we can do other things, so we can have a little bit of a home life, so we can maybe deal with other projects. And really, we've learned how to pace ourselves in a way that we can do it. We can continue to do it physically because as you get older, touring and playing live is not as easy as it used to be. So I think we've been very good and very sensible at that. And I think we continue to do it. And I think, the fact is, Daryl and I are really proud of our musical legacy.
Right.
And we're not ashamed of it, and we're not tired of it. And we don't do it so much that we say, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. And we know when to step out so we can step back with a renewed, as JFK said, a renewed vigor.
Okay. So I know that you and Daryl are currently working on new music.
Well, sort of, not really. We were going to work on new music.
Do you retain any pressure from your past successes when working on new material?
No, it's been so long since we made a record together that I don't even know what we would do. Daryl wanted to do it. He met a young producer in Holland. We met this guy. He was great, very, very innovative. He grew up on our music, so we thought there was a synergy there. Daryl was excited about working with him, but the rug got pulled out from under us with COVID, and the whole thing just came to a grinding halt.
Yeah.
So I don't know where we'll resume and when we'll resume. It would be nice to try, and I'm sure whatever we do is going to be interesting, and it'll be unique.
So you'll be 73 this April.
Really? Who's counting?
Why do you think performing is still so vital to you at this point in your career and in your life?
It's the way it's the way you stay vital. It keeps you alive, man. It just, the connection with an audience, the very act of playing all the time. I know that when I'm on tour and I'm playing every night, when I come back off a tour, if I go into the studio, man, I am on top of my game. And it was really interesting not touring this whole year. And I'll go back to that song that I just wrote, the Sonny Terry and Brownie McGhee song. I've learned that if you play a song live, you really learn what works, how to change the arrangement, tempo, all sorts of things become apparent by playing it live. Well, I didn't have the ability to do that. So what I did was, after I wrote the song, I played it about 2 or 3 times a day for about 3 weeks straight. And I pretended that I was playing it live. And during that 3 weeks, the song got better and better and better. Little subtle tweaks of the way I played the chords, the rhythms, little subtle tweaks to the lyrics, little subtle tweaks that I would have done had I been playing live. And I'd never done that before. And, hey, it was great.
If you were allowed to release one song of yours, and only one song to share with the world, what do you think it would be? She's Gone.
There's something about that song is it's just perfect. I don't know what.
So you were Hunter S. Thompson's neighbor for about 25 years in White Creek, Colorado.
Yeah. We still have our house out there right across from him. Yeah.
Walk me through that.
Well, yeah, I can tell you a quick anecdotal story. It's actually in the book. But when my wife and I, my wife found the property, my wife and I were dating. but we were very serious and we were going to live together. We were looking for some property. I had found a house in downtown Aspen, Colorado that I thought was really cool, but she, having grown up on a farm, didn't want to live in downtown. She wanted to have some land. So she found another piece of property. So she took me out to look at it with a real estate agent who was a friend of ours. So we're standing there. There was nothing on it. It was just a field, a couple fields, and a little horse barn and a little cabin. There was nothing much on it. And the cabin had a metal roof. And while we were talking, you know, looking around at the property, all of a sudden we heard boom, boom. We heard these two shotgun blasts. And all of a sudden we heard these pellets hitting this metal roof right where we were standing. And I was like, holy crap. I said to the real estate agent, well, what the heck's that? And he goes, oh, that's your neighbor. That's the Doc Hunter Thompson. And I was like, oh, really? Should we be worried about this? And he's like, nah, it'll be fine. And so that just gives you a little idea. But he ended up becoming, my wife had birds. My wife had peacocks and emus and guinea fowl and chickens and ducks. And Hunter Thompson had peacocks. So his peacocks would come over to our place. Ours would go to his place. So he really liked us because we had birds and he was a bird guy.
Awesome.
But we got along really well because, I slept at night. He slept during the day. It was perfect.
Anything you want to add before we wrap up?
No, it's been a great interview. I didn't know we were going this deep, but I like it.
Thank you very much. Tell Daryl I said, what's up?
Okay, I will. All right.
And good luck, John, and God bless you. And thank you so much for doing this.
All right. Well, I appreciate you spreading the word on the festival because the music is going to be fantastic.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it. So don't forget, March 20th, live stream.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Peace, man.
Great talking to you, Joby. You're a good interviewer.
Thank you very much, sir.
All right, man. See you.